I think we're live. But if we are live, welcome to the Cricket8 Podcast. I'm one half of today's Cricket8 Podcast episode, Machel and Jarrod. And whether to my left or to my right, depending on what your screen is showing you, you should... you should be able to see Jarrod Kimber. So, Jarrod, unless you're shaking like inside a washing machine right now, how are you doing?
I'm excellent, and just happy to be on any side of the frame that we decide.
Listen, Jarrod, as ever on the Cricket8 Podcast, what the people don't see is backstage in the virtual green room, we have a bit of a discussion about what's a key topic, and this particular title. So just to read it out formally, this title says, which T20 leagues can survive the next 10 years? But we kind of got to that title after hashing out 3 different kind of versions of it. And I could and truly probably should have, Jarrod, have said which T20 leagues outside of the IPL can survive in the next 10 years. But let's see where this goes. I mean, we're probably going to get a ton of comments, whether live now or people watching this on the replay with regards to it. But let's try and avoid IPL until we have to get to it, because it's the obvious answer. Let me start here, Jarrod. What does, in 2024, what does a good franchise league look like? Because I think that's a harder question. What if you were going to somebody with serious money and you wanted to start a franchise league, what does it look like now as compared to 10 years ago?
I think 10 years ago, it probably meant that there was a very reasonable chance the next year it would run. Like, I think it was that bad. The old SLPL, do you remember the SLPL? How many leagues has South Africa had in the last decade? I think they're on their 3rd T20 league. So I think at that stage, it was probably, can you be running next year and probably at least pay your bills for the next 12 months? And I think things have changed very, very differently, from there. So I think now it's probably, what is your projection from years 2 to 5? And then the second thing is, what are the aims of the league? So, like, I just see here, SS98 Sport, the IPL and the MLC with the only 2 leagues surviving the next 10 years. I mean, that's just obviously false, right? Because there's a lot of leagues who don't need, like, put it this way, the New Zealand Domestic League could run for another 40 years, Mash. Now, no one's ever going to watch it, right? It's never going to be an international league, but what is the New Zealand League? Maybe they just want a small domestic league to be able to pick from their players, make a little bit of extra cash outside of international cricket. So it really depends now on where you want to aim. So I would say that there are leagues like the SA20, which are very progressive and capitalistic and everything. That could collapse in a heap, right? And has collapsed in a heap before in South Africa. Whereas a league like the New Zealand Domestic League might run on for another 10 or so years because it's not trying to get rich. It's just trying to, go through. So there's very different kinds of leagues that we're talking about here. So every time you look at what a league is trying to do, I think it's more important to be like, so we just had and I know you're going to love this more than anyone, but we now have the Cayman Island T20 tournament. Or T10 tournament,
yes.
sorry.
Have you managed to catch any of it thus far?
I can't believe I didn't get a job as a player, let alone as a coach or as an analyst. But let's be honest, the idea that league will be around in 10 years is farcical, right? Like, the chances that it will be around, it's not being set up to be around in a couple of years, right? It's probably just being set up to be around for a couple of years. Make some money, and then it will fade away, and they will go and, I don't know, where's another tax haven? They'll find the next tax haven to have a tournament in, right? Whereas you go then to, some of these other domestic leagues, right? And they do want to run for a long period of time, and they want to pick their local players from it and everything else. So leagues have very different ideas. The SA20, the 100, Major League Cricket, these all want to be the second biggest league in cricket, right? The Big Bash has kind of already given up on that one. Right? The Big Bash for a while wanted to do that. So the Big Bash's future is probably more solid because it's just going to go along, a little bit. Whereas these other leagues, they have really high-end plans, which means the whole thing could collapse.
So pause there, Jarrod, because I was going to bring up Big Bash. because I think your point is valid there. I think there's some leagues, and we can get into which ones, are scrambling to be number 2. I think I'm glad you made that point about Australia, because I think the Big Bash have accepted we have our own league in our own hemisphere. We know what works, and we're happy appealing to our market. We're not going to try and come up with any particular fandangles that might expand it anymore. We're just going to keep within ourselves and make whatever profit we can. And I just wonder, is that a more sustainable model than what some of the others are? Or do you think number 2 is a position that people should be trying to claim, so to speak?
I think America, England, and probably Pakistan can make a fair claim that they could make the second biggest league in the world, right? But there is an argument of what's the second biggest league in the world in basketball,
right? Okay, yeah.
It's probably Spain, don't get me wrong, and the Spanish league is a very strong basketball league, but about 98% of the conversation is about the NBA and 1% is about Spain. Does it matter if you're the second biggest? Right. And so I think there's a lot of people trying to make a claim that they want to be the second biggest league. And Big Bash was one of them for a long period of time. Right. Whereas I would be saying, what is the best league that we can run? Right. And if they really wanted to be the second biggest league, you wouldn't do it as a single country anyway. Like PSL is a really interesting one. PSL actually has, I think, a genuine chance of being the second biggest league in T20 cricket. And I love the fact that they're just going to play it against the IPL, because I think that's a much better opportunity. Pakistan fans are still going to like it. And international fans, they're going to watch the IPL, and a couple of them will seep over the PSL. For the PSL to be successful, it is in Pakistan, right? But if the PSL really wanted to be the genuinely second biggest competition in the world, their best chance would really be to merge with the league in Sri Lanka, the league in Bangladesh, maybe Nepal, maybe have an Omani team if they wanted to. However they look at that, that would be a genuine second league, right? Whereas actually what we are seeing here is a bunch of local domestic leagues. So I think you're right. You have to understand what you are trying to do. And I think that the Big Bash, I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but I know you'll like this. Melbourne Stars have a big green star on their shirt. Right? That is because they thought they'd be able to, they'd be so popular, the Big Bash, that they'd sell shirts in Pakistan. Right?
Okay.
That's how delusional. I mean, they didn't understand how shirt sales work in Pakistan. Like, what percentage of shirt sales in Pakistan are not bootlegged to begin with? Yeah. But secondly, they didn't really understand the fact that, what? Because you've got Shahid Afridi here. We can buy a Pakistan shirt with Shahid Afridi on the back. So they didn't understand that. And they've now pulled back to be like, we're a domestic league and this is what we do. But you look at the 100 and you look at the Major League Cricket, and potentially, as I said, Pakistan, if they expanded in the way that I said before, those leagues have a genuine chance, I think, with the amount of people that follow the game, with the kind of sports markets they have, with the kind of TV and streaming markets that they have, to genuinely be the second biggest league. But the problem with that is, with Major League Cricket, the first year of Major League Cricket, I promise you, got within 21 days of being cancelled. Right? I think it was 21 or 22 days out, I was getting messages from people in and around that going, we're not sure this is going to go ahead, right? So it would be impossible for me to sit here and say that it is definitely a tournament that is going to be the second biggest in the world or one of the biggest in the world. And conversely, the Georgie Pie Super Smash, or whatever it's called, the Rams, whatever they call it in New Zealand at the moment, right? We know that's going to run every single year. So what is success? What are these leagues trying to get out of it is the bigger thing. And I think the more you swing, the more chance you have of getting clean bowled, which is, it's a cricket metaphor.
We're just going to bring up, here we go. So Daniel M says, should cricket leagues go down the route of club football with multiple leagues occurring concurrently, or should it continue with the US model with the IPL as the big one? I mean, loads of people have asked you this question before, Jarrod, and I'm sure your answer may change as years go on, but obviously I think formerly known as FICA, I'm not sure what they're known as now. I know the Players Association is pretty upset with how things are currently working in regards to international cricket. So this is kind of a parallel question to what we're focusing on, but what is the best model for the leagues to continue, whichever leagues it is that does continue?
So I'm not an expert in football, but the one thing I can tell you is most of those football leagues are run for domestic fans.
Right.
So I don't follow football in Portugal, but I'm assuming that the vast majority of people who follow football in Portugal are Portuguese and care about Portuguese football, right? New Zealand fans, the vast majority of them care about New Zealand cricket. Sri Lankan fans, the vast majority of them care about Sri Lankan cricket. So there's no reason why you can't have multiple leagues. And the USA model is quite an interesting one, because the USA model is very different, because we don't already have all these different nations. USA sports start as American centric, and then over the years basketball starts to get more international, obviously baseball starts to get a little bit more international, and then hockey is kind of already Canadian, and you've got the American football is basically just being played in America at a really high level, right? But the basketball and baseball are already expanding, and you have people playing basketball in China and Europe and Australia at the same time the NBA is on. And the same thing goes for baseball. You have big leagues in Japan and other countries that are being played at the same time that the Major League Baseball is going on, right through Central America. So those are being played again for local audiences. So you have to decide when you're making your league what you're doing. This idea of should cricket leagues go down? Well, why would New Zealand give up? I don't know what their local league, and I mention them because they're the ones, they have the lowest expectations of any T20 league I've ever seen, right? They're not even pretending. Like even the Bangladesh Premier League at one stage was like, we're going to spend all this money. And lots of different leagues have. And in New Zealand, they're just like, we're just going to make sure that we have games and that we have nice uniforms, and then it's shown on TV. And that's all we're going to do. And why would they care about when their leagues are or when their leagues aren't? Now, as long as it's not clashing with the IPL, so they don't lose their top New Zealand players available to them, right? But that's going to happen now anyway, right? Finn Allen has just signed a Big Bash deal, which is going to clash with the New Zealand tournament. I don't think it's a real pain in the butt for New Zealand. And we've seen Trent Bolt and other players play in other leagues instead of playing in New Zealand. But that New Zealand league keeps going on because it is for local fans to turn up to the ground and local fans to turn on their TV and to stream, right? The issue becomes when you try and become more than what you should become. Right. And, with the SLPL, where it was going to be the second biggest league, when the PSL was going to be this massive league, right? And all these different leagues, and the BPL, when Bangladesh put all that money into the league and it collapsed. And remember, we're on part 2 of South Africa trying to have a global T20 league. The first one completely fell apart. So that's when the issues really come in for me. But if I'm New Zealand, I don't give a shit if we're doing the club football model or the USA model. I just care that my fans can go to cricket games with decent level professional players with nicely colored kits under lights. Like, that's all I care about. So cricket's going to grow in different ways in different places. And occasionally you will have like the ILT20, which we haven't talked about yet. That is, I reckon that's about the 5th iteration of trying to get a major T20 tournament into, Dubai or Abu Dhabi, right? And every time they've tried to do it, it's collapsed because trying to make a really big tournament is actually really, really hard. Trying to make a teeny tiny little tournament is actually not that hard, right? As shown by our friends in the Cayman Islands right now.
So I'm taking from you saying that, do you think then that some leagues are making a mistake in let me take it let me take a twofold approach to this. Do you think they're making a mistake in only targeting Indian investment? I'm not saying it is a mistake. I'm just asking the question. So are they making a mistake in only targeting Indian investment? And or are they making a mistake in only trying to target the Indian audience? Because every time you hear about a league, you hear, well, we're going to try and tap into the Asian subcontinent, and if we get eyes on the product and this, that, and the other. And I guess going full circle to our question, can a league be bigger than the New Zealand iteration without explicitly needing both Indian investment and Indian eyes on the product? Or is that a byproduct of having to grow?
I think if you had like the sort of league I was talking about before, so the Big Bash is a perfect example of a league that probably should have the best plan would have been the Big Bash had 6 teams or 8 teams, South Africa had 4 teams, New Zealand had 3 teams. Would have been the best version of the Big Bash, and that would have been a league that I think would have had multi-international interest. And I think people from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh would have been interested in watching that, right? I think that at that stage, it's a little bit more interesting than just watching the Renegades go up against the Stars, right? I think there's something on the line there, and it's a combination of international and domestic. The problem and I've had this conversation with people who started leagues, successful leagues and unsuccessful leagues before, of this idea that suddenly all these Indians are going to watch your league without Indian players seems farcical to me. On top of that, most of these leagues are not in the right time zone, right? So Major League Cricket going a different direction, I thought was quite smart. They're just like, look, we're going to make a product for local cricket fans. We know that a lot of those are going to be Indian and Pakistani and Sri Lankan and Bangladeshi and West Indian and Australian and whatever. But we're actually making it for American fans to come and watch this because that's where we're going to make our money. But they can afford to do that, right? Some of these other countries, the CPL even better than I do. The CPL just can't make money. Right? It's been treading water for the longest time because it's in the wrong time zone. It doesn't have any Indian players. Indian investment in the CPL has saved the ownerships of those teams. It hasn't actually made the leagues all that much more money, right? It hasn't made the CPL isn't a lot more profitable because of that. The difference is now that you have good structure ownership groups in there that rather than some of the cowboys they had in before. So I think it's very, very hard to be able to do any of that sort of stuff. However, there are probably things you can do to make your league slightly more interesting to outsiders. But I don't know if we ever see leagues really try anything like that. And you would probably have to agree that even if it wasn't successful, that's what the 100 was trying to do, right? I've come up with something new that would get people. But how many people from outside of England, well, not that we both know a lot of people in England who don't particularly like the 100, but how many people from outside of England are like, oh, wait, they've shaved 20 balls off. Now we have to watch it. So I think it's really tough. I think if you don't start with the core, and there's two cores, I would say, Mash. Core one is local fans, and core two is hardcore T20 fans. And hardcore T20 fans, weirdly enough, are very picky, and there's a lot of leagues they will not watch and they're not interested in. And so those are the two things that you really need to get on side first. And then the third one is probably the gambling fans, right? Is this a league that is seen as worth their money gambling on, right? And is it dodgy? Do they, I could be wrong here, but I just think there's a lot of people probably watching cricket in the Cayman Islands at the moment, assuming that is a dodgy league. I'm not saying it is, but just assuming that it is, and maybe not gambling at the same level they would be with others. But those are the three sort of core audiences of these T20 leagues, right? And then the only other thing you're going to get is casual fans flicking over. And I don't think you're ever going to get enough of those to flick over at 6 a.m. to watch a T20 league, or I don't know, 2 p.m. in the afternoon to watch a T20 league that will change. And just on SS's comment here, he says, should we compare a domestic league with an international league? The New Zealand T20 league or the SMAT from India can't be compared to the IPL, PSL, etc. So this is where it gets very confusing because the New Zealand league does have international players in it, right? They do have international players. So what's the difference is that New Zealand is not trying to market their league to the world, and they're not trying to push it, and they're not spending money to make it a bigger event than it is, whereas the PSL has done that. And so those are very, very different again. And so, but that doesn't mean that the SMAT or the New Zealand league can't disappear. As I said, I still think the most logical future for New Zealand cricket is for them to be involved with the Big Bash.
So today, there's a piece which has been written by Daniel Brettig, I think. I can't remember the newspaper. Is it the Herald? I think it is. I can't remember in Australia.
Sydney Morning Herald, yeah. The Fairfax group. We only have two newspapers in Australia. We just have different titles on them all, but that's a completely different conversation.
So I managed to get a sneak peek at it behind the paywall. And effectively, they're talking about how Jay Shah's going to be the new ICC chair, which I don't think that's a big surprise. But there was this big piece in the article about how they're worried about Star Sports, and Star want to renegotiate the rights deal because they paid over the odds for it, etc. The reason why I'm referencing that in relation to what we're talking about is, do you think some leagues are going to struggle in the near future with rights deals? IPL won't, but do you think, and maybe Big Bash won't, because I think they've just announced their latest whatever it is. It looks like the 100 won't either, but do you think there are some leagues who TV companies or rights marketers are going to now say, actually, we're not paying you that much for this because it's not worth our while. Is that where we'll start to see leagues struggle?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take out the leagues like the Cayman Islands and the Abu Dhabi T10 and all that, where we don't even know how they exist in the first place, and we don't understand who's paying for those rights, and all that sort of stuff. But if you look at the other ones, it basically comes down to, I remember Usman Samiuddin asking the head of the ICC during the Big Three takeover, what makes Cricket Australia, BCCI, and ECB better cricket boards than the other boards, other than the fact that they're in richer media markets, right? And this long pause of like no one had ever actually thought about that before, and it was like suddenly it was like, yeah, they're not probably better boards. They shouldn't be taking over anything. They just happen to be coming from a position where they can make more money than other places, and that's the issue. So if you look at that sort of period where Lalit Modi was, sort of in charge or involved with the BCCI, he would actually try and manufacture bidding wars between, I think it was a company called Nimbus or whatever they were called, so that there were two companies going for it to inflate the rights. And we've seen that in the UK. One of the UK's biggest problems is, I think cricket's probably worth more than what Sky pay for it. But Sky are only going up against TNT or Eurosport, or BT when BT, TNT, whatever they were. And it's really hard to get the rates inflated. Right. And it's the same with Australia at times, where you have a situation where pay TV is not particularly big in Australia. And you've got the channels, one channel's out of Channel 10 on Channel 7 always seems to be in trouble. Channel 9, obviously, since the Packer days, not quite sure if they want to get involved in cricket again. So again, you don't have two strong entities bidding for the rights. So even in the richer countries, sometimes you're not making as much money from cricket as you should be. So now you go down to somewhere like New Zealand. Like, who's going to pay for cricket in New Zealand, Mash, right? Like, pardon me. And the same with, this in the Caribbean. One of the big problems in the Caribbean is, how would they make more money off even if cricket in the West Indies got a lot more popular, how would they make more money from the TV and the streaming rights from it, right?
Yeah.
If the market isn't there. And so realistically, you might have a situation where, I don't know, the BPL is suddenly worth a lot more money, not because it's a brilliantly run competition, but suddenly because two different TV organizations or two different streaming platforms or mobile platforms, as it's moving on now, want the rights to it at the same time. So you have these issues all the way through. And then there's this other thing that's happening in cricket now, is that teams pay extra money, right? For, not teams, TV companies or streamers or whoever pay extra money to get the rights. And then they wait about 6 months to a year. And then they try to renegotiate, go, oh, actually, we don't think we're getting this out of it. So the money that you thought you were getting, you're not always getting as well, or you're having to fight for it. So I think was it Channel 7 almost went to court, I think, with Cricket Australia. I know there are plenty of other boards that have done that. And then the third part, and this is the bit you're going to love, Mash, is that you see the ECB automatically signing deals with Sky, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, and re-upping their deals early, when it's like, well, wait a minute, TNT's about to come into this market and they're probably going to want to spend a bunch of cash. And, we saw radio rights, recently where, BBC got the rights for them, while I think TalkSport was still thought they were negotiating with the ECB, right? And I've seen that happen right around the world, right? Because the cricket boards and the broadcasters sometimes have these long-running relationships. So all of this is just cricket nonsense that I've talked about so far. Now you put in the fact that mobile companies are coming in.
Right.
And streaming companies and all that sort of stuff. It actually gets more confusing. Like, who do you want to sell the major rights to? And, you look at the 100 and the way it works in the UK of like, they were desperate to get cricket onto free-to-air TV. But does it really help having 6 games a year on the BBC? Like, is that worth it to take the discount? Like, you have to make real decisions now. Oh, we want all the cricket to be on this mobile app, but that means everyone has to sign up to the mobile app, or maybe has to have a contract with the mobile company. Is that something that everyone who's a cricket fan of our team is going to be able to do? So it's really, really tricky.
See, as we slowly but surely bring this one to a close, remember, people, we always try and leave these on a cliffhanger. I would say that the next evolution of cricket, I think you and I have briefly kind of looked at this before, is digital, surely. It can't be. It can't be TV. I think TV rights to me is like an antiquated way of. But then cricket's so far behind everyone else, right? So to me, when we're talking about what does cricket and by extension T20 leagues in the future look like, to me it's a digital package that you're putting together. I don't think anyone's quite there yet in coming up with the concept to buy out the rights, but I would argue, Jarrod, 10 years from now I should be able to pick up my mobile phone, download an app which is showing me 10 T20 games across various leagues at the exact same time, and I should be able to just pick the one I want to watch. That's where I think it's going to go. Do you reckon that's what we're looking at?
The issue is, and it sort of comes back to your original question here, which is, we will say things like, oh, what should happen to this T20 league in the next few years, or this T20 league in the next few years. And I think these are all perfectly reasonable conversations to have, right? But the truth is that what really should happen is there should be some sort of organization that is actually involved with all of these, right? You can't just have a Cayman T20, a T10 tournament, or, something in Abu Dhabi, or, something in Hong Kong spring up like that without people should be applying for periods in the cricket calendar and all this sort of stuff, because then you could sell all that as an overall package so you could have your dream. The issue really is that no one runs cricket, right? And so someone's just put a message in here about KO, right? So in Australia. So that's an online streaming platform in Australia that you can get access to, right? But KO at the moment would have to do a deal with the Cayman Cricket Board. I'm just assuming there's Cayman Cricket Board. The Cayman Cricket Board, right? The South African Board, the Dubai. Do you see what? So if you're a broadcaster, you're in a situation where you have to do all these deals. And these deals are often done with very dodgy companies. I don't mean that in a bad way, but startups, right? Like they've just started this competition. Maybe it might be that you want to do a deal with it. You've got a window where you want to put a bunch of streaming content on your app. And that company is not actually, doesn't really run 12 months of the year. So you can't plan ahead to even do that deal. And I know of these sorts of things happening before. So again, we come to that sort of the bigger problem here, or the bigger issue that we have, which is that the same things keep happening. No one is in charge. And so the idea of just of a great cricket experience for a fan disappears again and again because of the fact that no one is in charge, no one is organizing this, and there is no one way. So even if we had, I don't know, let's say the ICC had a separate department that was made where they managed all of these leagues, right? And they're like, you can get your local deal and you can go after your major, let's say Indian deal on your own, but allow us via the ICC to sell off in every other territory for you. And we'll do it as a big package and you'll get a small wedge of money, which means that next year, you'll be able to run the tournament or at least pay a certain amount. And then maybe ICC TV, which is the new ICC thing on their website, maybe that can show that league. And that's the thing that you get on your phone. And then paid subscribers come on to that and pay for that, and again that money goes back to all these leagues. Because the thing I would say at the moment is, if you're paying all this money to get David Warner into your random league, how are you trying to make that back? And I know the answer in some of those occasions, Mash, is they're not, because they're probably doing something else far more dodgy. But in some cases, they are trying to make that money back, right? They are legitimately trying to make that money back. How does, I don't know, a small cricket league in Canada sell their rights to New Zealand, to South Africa, to, I don't know, Brazil, or wherever else they want it to be shown? It's really, really hard, right? And again, if you had an organization who did this and brought everything in together, we could then have it all in one app and it would make a lot more sense.
So ultimately then, let's end by answering the question. If you had to predict 10 years from now, 2034, which leagues do you think will definitely still be running, no matter what? If you had to, 10 years from now, I was going to say only 5, but you might say it's less than 5. Which ones do you think you would 100% expect to still be running 10 years from now? IPL being one, yeah.
Yeah. PSL,
right?
It may expand into different things, but I think the PSL will exist. the Big Bash will exist.
Yep.
That's as far as I would go in 10 years.
So I was going to say... say something in England, surely, but whatever it's called, something surely in England must
There will be a T20 competition in England, but will it be the Blast or will it be the 100? Would be my question to you, Bash. Right? So okay. I have no. So I'm not saying that all these countries won't have T20 cricket anymore, but will they have the same league structure that they currently have? So let's look at the New Zealand one, right? So the New Zealand league might still exist, but maybe their best teams will play in the Big Bash. So which one do we consider them in? At that point, is the New Zealand league still a major league? If it's running at the same time the Big Bash is on, probably not, right? SA20, I think there's an element of the SA20 that will go on because I think the SA20 and the CPL are feeder leagues.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And because of that, maybe they can just go on for a long period of time. I don't have any, so they might stick around. But we both know that probably neither of those competitions will make money either, right? And I mean real money, like money, sustainable money, I suppose.
I agree.
So I find it really hard. So I have an issue with those two leagues. The Sri Lankan league, we're on the third Sri Lankan league. I don't know if on an hour by hour basis, I'm not sure if that's around. Bangladesh Premier League, I'm already shocked that hasn't collapsed and been replaced by something else already. And it kind of has if you think about when all the owners got kicked out at one stage. So it's even slightly different. IRT20, there will be a league in the Dubai in 10 years' time. Whether it's the IRT20 or not, I have no idea. I wouldn't, if I was, who was it? Who was the big American family, the family that owned Manchester United, that owned the team over there?
The Glazers.
I'd be very nervous about owning a team in that league if it was me. Major League Cricket, it's just that it's so... I actually think that one has one of the better futures, but I also think that it's not fully formed yet. And because it's not fully formed yet in cricket, that usually means things can fall over. So we're going through a lot of different leagues here that we think could fall apart over and over again for slightly different reasons. And so, go
on. I was just going to say.
Let's talk over each other.
I was just going to say that I would expect Major League Cricket to survive just because America knows how to do sports, and if they had to, they wouldn't mind looking within themselves only. So, like for example, Major League Soccer, in and of itself, it's not big. It's not one of the major. Yes, they've got Messi, but it's not a major soccer league in the world. But they don't care because they can survive within their own ecosystem. And I just assume with Major League Cricket that if push came to shove, they'd be like, well, we'll just survive within the United States because we're the United States. If they want it bad enough, I would expect Major League Cricket to have a greater existence or shelf life than CPL at this point in time. I expect to see some of the CPL teams merge into Major League Cricket in the future, like rather than CPL still surviving. If it's like so, and actually you hinted at it earlier on, and we should probably stop because we've gone over time. But we could maybe discuss this another time. Maybe some leagues have to become a super league.
Look, the issue is, I think everyone knows that is the best way of doing it. Right? Like, I shouldn't say that. I think everyone knows that is the best way of saving your league and making it more relevant and actually getting to that money that we're talking about here for some of these leagues. The issue is, Mash, and this is this is not going to be lost on you at all, but the issue is that most cricket boards hate each other and distrust each other. And that's where it comes in. So, we have seen them try and do it in Europe a few times, and it's never quite worked. And the New Zealand Cricket Board, the Australian Cricket Board, the South African Cricket Board, let's throw in Papua New Guinea because let's give them a side in this competition as well, are all run so differently that, it's really tricky. And Australia and New Zealand probably should be in a league together. And South Africa, if I was South Africa, I would have gone in here into the Big Bash, but I would have still got private ownership to come in to give me the money. Right? That's the way I would have tried to do it. But the truth is that South African cricket is run completely differently to Australian cricket. So how do you mash those two things together? Pardon the pun there. And I think that's the issue here. But you're right. I think I think those are the leagues that have a really, really strong chance of going together because the sport that cricket is probably most like we've seen, it's really interesting. We've seen people talk about USA sports and we've seen people talk about football. The sport that cricket is most like is rugby.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
It's kind of the opposite side of rugby, whereas rugby is sort of league and international, and cricket is international and league in the way that they currently run. But they're very similar, and they come from a similar kind of place. That is how rugby really made things work. Is that sort of international domestic style, and I think it would work perfectly for cricket. The issue is that rugby boards seem to have slightly better relationships with each other than cricket boards, and so it goes in a different way. But look, I still think that's the best idea. And then every other league becomes a domestic league or a feeder league, and they know their place and they do their jobs correctly. No one's going to have a problem with that.
Listen, people, Jarrod and I could continue to chop this up for another hour if we wanted to, but we're not going to. Thank you to everyone who has been in the comments. I can see that it's been something that has fostered a lot of opinion. If we weren't able to bring up your comment, don't worry, we were reading them, and that was guiding our conversation. If you're watching this, here we go. We got one. Jarrod just
no. I'm just popping some up just for the people, because there were some really good comments there. But if we went down every single rabbit hole that everyone put up, we would be here forever. I am available to work.
Do you know what, Jarrod?
T20 league.
Jarrod, Sid was putting a lot of comments in there about Mexico, so I expect to see on one of your future podcasts on weathering good areas or stupid stories, etc. I'm expecting to see you in the near future do something on Mexico. And
I don't know if you know this, and this is such a weird aside, but there was actually a great cricketer from Mexico in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So they've already had one star.
So, people, listen. If you're watching this on the replay, you can also comment below. But as ever, like, share, subscribe. Cricket8 Podcast. No one does it quite like Cricket8, and we shall see you again very, very soon.